The coordinated attack on Aventura Mall began at exactly 6:47 p.m. on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year. While thousands of customers moved between stores loaded with holiday purchases, 12 professional thieves spread throughout the mall like a military operation. Each team had studied the layout, memorized security protocols, and planned their escape routes. What they hadn't planned for was Sarah Thompson, the quiet mall security officer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Because beneath that understated uniform, and behind those wire-rimmed glasses, was 20 years of FBI field experience that was about to turn their perfect crime into their worst nightmare. I wonder where you're watching this story from today. Maybe you're in a busy shopping center like the one Sarah protected, or perhaps a quiet suburb where Black Friday feels like a distant chaos. Either way, you've probably walked past security guards hundreds of times without giving them a second thought. Most of the time, they're exactly what they appear to be. But sometimes, just sometimes, that quiet person watching the crowd carries a story that could save everyone around them. This is one of those times. Sarah Thompson had been working mall security at Aventura Mall in North Miami for exactly 6 months and 14 days. Not that anyone was counting, except Sarah, who had a habit of keeping precise records of everything, a trait that had served her well in her previous career and was about to prove invaluable again. At 28, she was younger than most of the security team, quieter than all of them, and had what her supervisor called an intensity problem. While other guards chatted with store employees, took extended breaks, and generally treated the job as an easy paycheck, Sarah walked her assigned sectors with the focused attention of someone who took security seriously. Too seriously, according to her colleagues. She acts like she's protecting Fort Knox instead of Victoria's Secret, complained Marcus Rivera, a veteran guard who'd been working mall security for 8 years. Girl needs to lighten up. It's just retail. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah's intensity came from 20 years of training that had taught her to see threats that others missed, to notice patterns that others ignored, and to prepare for contingencies that others couldn't imagine. Aventura Mall was a sprawling complex that covered over 2.7 million square feet, housed nearly 300 stores, and attracted over 27 million visitors annually. During normal times, it was a security professional's nightmare. Too many entrances, too many blind spots, too many variables to control. During Black Friday, it became something closer to organized chaos. Sarah's assigned sector included the main corridor between Macy's and Nordstrom, the food court, and the central court area where seasonal displays created additional visual barriers. It was premium retail territory, which meant expensive merchandise, high customer volume, and the kind of environment that attracted professional theft operations. Her daily routine was methodical. She arrived 30 minutes before her shift to review overnight incident reports and study the camera feeds. She walked her sector in calculated patterns that maximized visual coverage while minimizing predictability. She positioned herself at observation points that provided clear sightlines to high-risk areas. To her fellow guards, she looked obsessive. To anyone with law enforcement training, she looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The Aventura Mall security team consisted of 12 guards working in rotating shifts under Security Director Ramon Vasquez, a former Miami-Dade police officer who ran a competent but relaxed operation. Most of the guards were older men supplementing retirement income or younger people working their way through college. Sarah didn't fit either category, which made her an object of curiosity and mild suspicion. "What's her deal?" asked Jennifer Martinez, one of the few other female guards, during a break room conversation. Sarah wasn't supposed to overhear. She's got a college degree, speaks 3 languages, and chooses to work mall security. Something doesn't add up. Maybe she's got a record, suggested Marcus. Background check company missed something. Or maybe she's running from something, offered Tom Bradley, the oldest guard on the team. People don't usually downgrade their lives unless they're hiding from their past. They were closer to the truth than they realized, but not in the way they imagined. Sarah wasn't running from her past, she was using it. Every day, in ways her colleagues couldn't see. Her federal law enforcement experience informed how she approached mall security. Sarah's path to mall security had been neither straight nor simple. She'd joined the FBI at 22, fresh out of Georgetown University with degrees in criminal justice and computer science. Her first assignment had been to the Miami field office, where she'd spent 6 years working everything from white-collar crime to organized narcotics trafficking. Her specialty had been retail crime and organized theft operations, exactly the kind of sophisticated criminal enterprises that targeted high-end shopping centers like Aventura Mall. She'd learned to recognize the patterns, the surveillance techniques, the coordination methods that professional theft rings used to steal millions of dollars in merchandise without firing a shot or hurting anyone. For 14 years, Sarah had been one of the Bureau's most effective agents in combating organized retail crime. She'd infiltrated theft rings, tracked sophisticated fencing operations, and helped develop the federal databases that law enforcement used to identify and prosecute criminal organizations that specialized in high-value retail theft. But federal law enforcement was a demanding career that left little room for personal life. After her father's death 2 years ago, Sarah had made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She requested inactive status and stepped away from the Bureau to reassess her priorities and figure out what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. Mall security was supposed to be temporary, a way to stay connected to security work while she figured out her next move. What she hadn't expected was how much she'd enjoy the straightforward nature of protecting ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. What Sarah's colleagues interpreted as antisocial behavior was actually professional habit. While they saw her walking the corridors in silence, she was conducting the kind of systematic observation that had made her an effective federal agent. She memorized the regular customers, noted unusual behavior patterns, and tracked the seasonal changes in foot traffic and shopping behaviors. She identified the store employees who seemed nervous or distracted, watched for customers who paid too much attention to security cameras, and noticed when the same faces appeared in different parts of the mall over multiple days. 3 weeks ago, Sarah had begun noticing something that concerned her, a pattern of surveillance that was too systematic to be coincidental, too professional to be amateur, and too focused to be anything other than preparation for a major criminal operation. It started with the photographers. On a Tuesday morning in early November, Sarah noticed a woman taking pictures in the main corridor, with professional equipment. Not unusual by itself, lots of people photographed the mall's architecture and seasonal displays, but this photographer was documenting security cameras, emergency exits, and sight lines between major anchor stores. 2 days later, a different person, a man in his 30s wearing a maintenance uniform that didn't quite match the mall's official vendors, spent an hour near the security office, taking notes on a tablet. When Sarah approached to offer assistance, he claimed to be conducting an insurance inspection and produced credentials that looked legitimate but felt wrong. The following week brought a steady stream of people who exhibited what Sarah recognized as pre-operational surveillance behavior. They moved through the mall with purpose, but no clear shopping agenda, spent time in areas that provided observation points for security operations, and showed more interest in the mall's layout than in its merchandise. Each individual instance could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern that Sarah's FBI training had taught her to recognize. A target was being prepared for a sophisticated criminal operation. Sarah documented her observations in detailed reports that she submitted to Security Director Vasquez. She included photographs of the suspicious individuals, timestamps of their activities, and analysis of what appeared to be a systematic intelligence-gathering operation. Vasquez's response was dismissive. "Thompson, you're seeing conspiracies where there are none," he told her during a meeting that lasted less than 5 minutes. "This is a shopping mall, not a federal building. People take pictures, people ask questions, people look around. That's what customers do." "Sir, this isn't customer behavior," Sarah replied, trying to keep frustration out of her voice. "This is reconnaissance. Someone is planning something." "Planning what? To steal some handbags? To boost some electronics?" Vasquez shook his head. "Even if you're right, which I doubt, it's not our job to prevent every shoplifting operation in South Florida. We respond to incidents. We don't go looking for trouble." Sarah tried a different approach. "What if I'm right? What if this is preparation for something bigger than shoplifting? Then the Miami-Dade Police Department will handle it. Vasquez said with finality. Our job is to provide visible security presence and assist customers. Your job is to walk your sector and radio for backup if you see an actual crime in progress. Understood? Sarah understood perfectly. She also understood that her concerns were being dismissed by someone who had no experience with organized criminal operations, and no training in threat assessment. If something was being planned for Aventura Mall, she was going to be the only one prepared for it. Unable to get support from her security team, Sarah began conducting her own intelligence operation. During her off hours, she reviewed publicly available social media posts tagged at Aventura Mall. Looking for reconnaissance photos that might have been posted by mistake, she cross-referenced faces from the mall's security cameras with facial recognition databases she still had access to through professional contacts. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Several of the individuals conducting surveillance at the mall had connections to known organized retail crime operations. One had been arrested in New Jersey for participating in a coordinated theft ring that had stolen over $3 million in merchandise from 12 different malls. Another had been identified as an associate of a crew that specialized in high-end jewelry and electronics theft. Most concerning was a woman who had appeared on the mall's cameras multiple times over the past month. Facial recognition identified her as Maria Santos, a logistics coordinator for one of the most sophisticated theft operations on the East Coast. Santos specialized in planning large-scale coordinated thefts that involved multiple teams, precise timing, and detailed knowledge of security protocol. If Maria Santos was involved, this wasn't going to be a simple shoplifting operation. This was going to be a professional heist designed to steal hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, of dollars worth of merchandise in a single coordinated operation. Sarah's analysis of the surveillance patterns revealed the probable target date: Black Friday. The logic was obvious. Maximum customer volume would provide cover for the operation. Overwhelmed security would be slower to respond, and the chaos of the busiest shopping day of the year would mask coordinated criminal activity until it was too late to prevent. The targeting was also becoming clear. The surveillance had focused on 12 specific stores, high-end retailers that carried easily transportable, high-value merchandise, jewelry stores, electronics retailers, designer clothing boutiques, exactly the kind of targets that professional theft operations prefer. Sarah estimated that a coordinated theft operation targeting those 12 stores could net between $1.5 and $3 million in merchandise, depending on timing and execution. Split among a 12-person crew, it would be one of the most profitable single-day operations in retail crime history. She prepared a detailed briefing document with photos, timeline analysis, and specific recommendations for additional security measures during Black Friday. She included contact information for FBI specialists, who could provide technical assistance, and suggested coordination with local law enforcement to prepare for a potential major incident. Vasquez's response was even more dismissive than before. "Thompson, I'm going to say this once. Stop playing FBI agent and start doing your job. If you submit another one of these fantasy reports, I'm going to have to question whether you're suited for security work." With 5 days until Black Friday, and no support from mall security management, Sarah made a decision that would have been familiar to her federal law enforcement colleagues. She was going to handle the situation herself. She couldn't prevent the theft operation. She was one person with limited authority and no know-beth. But she could prepare to respond effectively when it began, minimize the impact on innocent customers, and ensure that the criminals didn't escape with their intended profits. Sarah spent her off-duty hours studying the mall's layout in detail, identifying optimal response routes and potential containment strategies. She reviewed emergency protocols and located equipment that could be useful in a crisis situation. Most importantly, she prepared contingency plans for different scenarios, depending on how the theft operation unfolded. On Thursday evening, 18 hours before the mall would be flooded with Black Friday shoppers, Sarah received confirmation that her analysis had been correct. Maria Santos appeared on 3 different security cameras, conducting what was clearly a final reconnaissance of the target stores. The operation was scheduled for Friday. Sarah would be ready. Sarah arrived at Aventura Mall at 4:30 a.m. on Black Friday, 3 hours before her scheduled shift, and 5 hours before the coordinated theft operation she expected to unfold. The parking lots were already filling with eager shoppers camping out for doorbuster deals, and the mall was buzzing with the controlled chaos of retailers preparing for the year's biggest sales day. She used her early arrival to conduct a final security assessment and position resources that might be useful during the anticipated crisis. Sarah placed emergency communication equipment at strategic locations, identified potential escape routes that the theft crew might use, and mentally rehearsed response scenarios for different contingencies. Her fellow security guards arrived with the usual mix of excitement and dread that Black Friday brought. The day would be exhausting: 12 hours of crowd control, lost child reunions, and minor incidents amplified by stress and caffeine. None of them were prepared for the sophisticated criminal operation that was about to unfold. "You're here early," observed Marcus Rivera as he checked in for his shift. Eager to deal with the Black Friday madness? "Just wanted to be prepared," Sarah replied, which was true in ways Marcus couldn't imagine. By 6:00 a.m., when the mall opened to the first wave of early shoppers, Sarah was positioned in the central court area with clear visual access to 8 of the 12 stores she expected to be targeted. Her radio was set to the security frequency, but she also carried a cell phone with direct contact numbers for Miami-Dade police and FBI field agents who could provide backup if the situation escalated beyond mall security's capabilities. The theft operation unfolded exactly as Sarah had predicted, with military precision and professional execution that confirmed everything she'd suspected about the crew's capabilities. At 6:47 p.m., during the peak shopping hour when the mall was packed with customers and security guards were spread thin managing crowd control, 12 individuals simultaneously entered their assigned target stores. Each moved with the calm confidence of someone following a rehearsed plan. Sarah, positioned where she could observe the central corridor, immediately recognized Maria Santos entering the Nordstrom jewelry department. 2 other faces from her surveillance photos appeared at different stores within 30 seconds of each other. The coordination was perfect, the timing was precise, and the execution was professional. This was it. The operation she'd been tracking for 3 weeks was now in progress. Sarah activated her radio and attempted to alert the security control room. "Control. This is Thompson. I have multiple suspicious individuals entering Target stores simultaneously. Request immediate backup to all luxury retailers." The response was predictably dismissive. "Thompson, it's Black Friday. Everyone's suspicious when they're fighting for deals. Unless you have an actual crime in progress, maintain your position and monitor." Sarah had expected this response. She was now operating under the protocols she'd learned during 20 years of federal law enforcement. When faced with an imminent threat and no institutional support, an agent's responsibility was to protect innocent civilians and prevent criminal success using any legal means available. What followed was a masterclass in organized retail crime that would have impressed Sarah's former FBI colleagues. Each team moved through their assigned stores with precise knowledge of inventory locations, security camera blind spots, and employee procedures. They targeted specific high-value items, worked in coordinated pairs to distract and confuse store personnel, and maintained constant communication through concealed earpieces. The operation was designed to avoid traditional loss prevention triggers. Instead of grabbing merchandise and running, the teams used sophisticated distraction techniques, false returns with counterfeit receipts, and employee impersonation to access restricted areas. By the time store employees realized what was happening, each team had already secured their targets and was moving toward predetermined exit points. Sarah watched the operation unfold with the analytical eye of someone who had spent years studying exactly this type of criminal enterprise. The crew was stealing approximately $200,000 worth of merchandise every 10 minutes, using techniques that would be difficult to prosecute even if they were caught, because each individual theft appeared to be a legitimate transaction, until analyzed as part of the larger pattern. Mall security was completely unaware that anything unusual was happening. The theft teams had timed their operation to coincide with the peak shopping period, when security guards were dealing with crowd control, lost children, and minor disputes between stressed shoppers. The perfect cover for the perfect crime. But Sarah wasn't just any security guard, and she wasn't going to let perfect criminals escape with a perfect heist. Using tactics she'd learned during undercover operations with the FBI, Sarah began her own coordinated response. Instead of trying to arrest the thieves, which would have been impossible for one person against 12 professionals, she focused on disrupting their operation and documenting evidence that would ensure successful prosecution. Her first move was to discreetly photograph each team member using her phone, capturing clear facial images and detailed documentation of their activities. These photos would be crucial for federal prosecution of the organized crime ring. Next, Sarah began subtly interfering with the theft operations coordination. She positioned herself near key communication points, used her security radio to create interference on the frequencies the crew was likely using, and managed foot traffic patterns to create unexpected delays and complications for teams trying to maintain their precise timing. Most importantly, Sarah began alerting store employees to the theft in progress using techniques that wouldn't trigger the crew's awareness that they'd been detected. A whispered word to a jewelry store manager about checking recent transactions, a casual suggestion to an electronics employee about reviewing security camera footage, a professional heads-up to loss prevention personnel about suspicious return activity. Sarah's interference was subtle but effective. The theft operation's precision timing began to falter as store employees started paying closer attention to the suspicious customers. Security cameras were redirected to focus on the active thefts, and communication frequencies became unreliable. Maria Santos was the first to realize that their operation was being compromised. Sarah watched through the Nordstrom store window as Santos spoke urgently into her concealed microphone, clearly receiving reports that other teams were experiencing unexpected difficulties. At 7:23 p.m., 36 minutes into what should have been a 45-minute operation, Santos made a decision that changed everything. Instead of proceeding with the planned timeline, she signaled for immediate extraction. All teams were to grab what they could and evacuate immediately. The coordinated theft operation became a chaotic grab and run that put innocent shoppers in immediate danger. Professional criminals who had been working with surgical precision were now desperate to escape with whatever merchandise they could carry, and they were no longer concerned about maintaining their cover or avoiding confrontation. Sarah had forced the perfect crime to become an imperfect escape, and now she had to deal with the consequences. The transformation from coordinated heist to chaotic flight happened in seconds. Professional thieves who had been calmly executing a sophisticated operation suddenly became desperate criminals willing to use force to secure their escape. The change put every innocent shopper in Aventura Mall at risk. Sarah watched Maria Santos emerge from Nordstrom carrying 2 bags of high-end jewelry and moving toward the north exit with purposeful speed. 3 other team members were converging on the same exit point, clearly following a predetermined evacuation plan. But their timing was off, their coordination was broken, and their behavior was now attracting exactly the kind of attention they'd been avoiding. Other shoppers were beginning to notice the unusual activity. A mother with 2 small children stepped out of Santos's path with a confused expression. An elderly man paused to stare at the group of people moving with obvious urgency through the crowded corridor. A teenager pulled out her phone to record what she sensed was an unusual situation. Sarah made a decision that drew on every tactical training scenario she'd experienced during her FBI career. She couldn't arrest 12 criminals by herself, but she could prevent their escape and ensure they were held accountable for their crimes. She activated her cell phone and called 911, providing specific details about the organized theft in progress and requesting immediate law enforcement response. Then she called her former FBI supervisor, Agent Patricia Wilson, who was still assigned to the Miami field office. "Pat, this is Sarah Thompson. I'm at Aventura Mall and I have a major organized retail crime operation in progress. 12 suspects, estimated $2 million in stolen merchandise, coordinated operation with professional execution. I need immediate federal response." Wilson's reply was immediate and professional. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" "I'm absolutely sure. I've been tracking them for 3 weeks. This is the real deal. Federal units are rolling. Can you maintain visual contact until we arrive?" Sarah looked across the mall at the chaos unfolding as 12 professional criminals tried to escape with millions of dollars in stolen merchandise, while thousands of innocent shoppers continued their Black Friday shopping, unaware of the danger surrounding them. "I can do better than maintain visual contact," Sarah said. "I can make sure they don't leave with the merchandise." What followed would later be described by witnesses as the most professionally executed single-person law enforcement intervention in Miami-Dade County history. Sarah Thompson, armed with nothing but 20 years of federal training and an intimate knowledge of both criminal tactics and mall security systems, systematically prevented 12 professional thieves from escaping with their stolen merchandise. Her first move was to use the mall's emergency communication system to alert store managers throughout the complex. Using her security radio and the mall's administrative emergency frequency, Sarah broadcast a detailed description of the theft operation in progress and provided specific instructions for lockdown procedures that would prevent the criminals from reaching their vehicles. Next, Sarah began using the mall's security infrastructure against the escaping thieves. She contacted the Central Security Office and, using her knowledge of FBI protocols and federal authority, convinced the duty supervisor to activate emergency lockdown procedures for all major exits. Magnetic locks engaged, security barriers deployed, and suddenly the thieves found their planned escape routes blocked. But the most impressive part of Sarah's intervention was her use of psychological tactics to turn the criminal organization against itself. Using her understanding of how professional theft rings operated, she began feeding false information into their communication network, creating confusion about which exits were clear, which team members had been compromised, and whether law enforcement response was imminent. Sarah's FBI training had taught her that the most effective way to defeat a coordinated criminal operation was to destroy its coordination. Professional theft rings depended on precise timing, reliable communication, and mutual trust among team members. Sarah systematically attacked all three foundations. She used her position as mall security to approach individual team members with false radio reports about law enforcement activity in other parts of the mall. She convinced the Central Security Office to place specific announcements over the mall's PA system that would trigger paranoia among the criminals about whether their operation had been compromised. Most effectively, she began discreetly alerting store loss prevention personnel to the specific items that had been stolen, allowing them to implement recovery procedures that put additional pressure on the escaping thieves. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Professional criminals who had been executing a perfect heist began making mistakes, abandoning merchandise, and acting erratically as they realized their operation was falling apart. Maria Santos, the operations coordinator, found herself trying to manage a 12-person crew that was receiving conflicting information, facing unexpected obstacles, and losing confidence in their leadership. The perfect crime was becoming a perfect disaster. At 7:45 p.m., 58 minutes after the theft operation had begun, Sarah found herself face-to-face with Maria Santos in the mall's central court area. Santos was carrying approximately $300,000 worth of stolen jewelry and attempting to reach an exit that Sarah knew was already secured by responding law enforcement. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sarah said, approaching Santos with the calm professionalism that had characterized her entire FBI career. "I need to speak with you about some recent transactions in the jewelry department." Santos immediately recognized that her cover was blown. Her response was exactly what Sarah expected from a professional criminal who had been cornered. Calm assessment, rapid calculation of options, and preparation for whatever action would provide the best chance of escape. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Santos replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I'm just shopping like everyone else." "I don't think so," Sarah said quietly. "I think you're Maria Santos, and I think you're coordinating the largest organized retail theft operation in South Florida history. And I think it's time for you to put down those bags and wait for federal agents to arrive." Santos's eyes narrowed as she processed this information. She was facing someone who knew exactly who she was and exactly what she was doing. Her careful professional operation had been blown by someone who understood criminal enterprises at least as well as she did. "Who are you?" Santos asked. "Someone who's been watching you for 3 weeks," Sarah replied. "Someone who knew exactly what you were planning and exactly how to stop it." The standoff between Sarah Thompson and Maria Santos lasted exactly 90 seconds, and ended when FBI agents and Miami-Dade police officers flooded the mall's central court area. The federal response was overwhelming, professional, and coordinated, exactly the kind of law enforcement operation that Sarah had been part of for 20 years. And exactly the kind that professional criminals like Santos had never successfully escaped. All 12 members of the theft ring were arrested simultaneously in a coordinated operation that recovered over $2.1 million in stolen merchandise and ended one of the most sophisticated organized retail crime operations in South Florida history. Maria Santos, facing federal charges for organized crime conspiracy, interstate transportation of stolen property, and leading a criminal enterprise, asked the arresting agent one question: who was the security guard? The answer surprised her as much as it had surprised everyone else at Aventura Mall. The arrest of 12 professional thieves in the middle of Black Friday shopping created a media sensation that lasted for weeks. FBI agent disguised as mall security stops $2 million heist became the headline that every news outlet in South Florida wanted to pursue. But Sarah declined all interview requests and asked the FBI to minimize her public profile. What she couldn't avoid was the conversation with her colleagues at Aventura Mall, who suddenly understood why the quiet security guard had seemed so different from everyone else on the team. 20 years with the FBI? Asked Marcus Rivera, still processing the revelation 3 days after the arrests. And you've been walking around here checking receipts and breaking up fights between teenagers? It's honest work, Sarah replied, which was true but didn't address the deeper question about why someone with her background and experience had chosen mall security as a career change. Security Director Vasquez was more direct in his questioning. Thompson, why didn't you tell me you were federal law enforcement? Why didn't you tell me you had experience with organized crime? Sarah's answer was simple and devastating. I did tell you. I submitted detailed reports about the surveillance I was observing. I warned you that a major operation was being planned. I provided specific recommendations for additional security measures. You dismissed everything I said because you thought mall security was too simple to require serious attention. The FBI's official investigation into the Aventura Mall case revealed the full scope of what Sarah had accomplished during her 6 months as mall security. The organized retail crime ring she'd identified and helped arrest was responsible for theft operations in 12 states, with total estimated losses of over 50. Her surveillance documentation and tactical analysis provided federal prosecutors with the evidence needed to secure convictions that would put the entire organization in federal prison for decades. Agent Patricia Wilson, Sarah's former supervisor, visited her personally to discuss the case and its implications. Sarah, what you did here was extraordinary. You identified a major criminal operation, conducted a solo intelligence gathering mission, and executed a tactical intervention that prevented millions in losses and protected thousands of innocent civilians. This is exactly the kind of work the Bureau needs from its best agent. Wilson paused before continuing. We want you back. Full reinstatement, promotion to supervisory special agent, choice of assignment. The Organized Crime Division specifically requested you for a new task force targeting retail crime ring. Sarah's response surprised Wilson as much as it had surprised everyone else who thought they understood her motivations. Pat, I appreciate the offer, but I like what I'm doing here. I like protecting ordinary people during ordinary moments. I like being someone that families trust when they're just trying to enjoy a day of shopping. That matters as much as anything we did with federal cases. The conversation with FBI leadership helped Sarah articulate something she'd been feeling but hadn't been able to express clearly. Her 20 years in federal law enforcement had been meaningful and important, but they had also been focused on reactive enforcement, catching criminals after crimes had been committed, prosecuting offenders after victims had been hurt, responding to threats after they had already materialized. Mall security, despite its humble appearance, had given her something different. The opportunity to prevent crimes before they happened, to protect people before they became victims, to create an environment where families could go about their lives without fear or worry. The organized retail crime case had been the perfect synthesis of her two careers. She'd used her federal law enforcement expertise to protect the ordinary people she'd come to care about during her months as mall security. It had been exactly the kind of work she wanted to continue doing. Aventura Mall's corporate management had a different perspective on Sarah's revelation. They offered her a promotion to Regional Security Director, a position that would have put her in charge of security operations for 12 shopping centers across South Florida. The salary would have been triple what she earned as a security guard, and the responsibility would have been commensurate with her skills and experience. Sarah declined that offer as well. I don't want to manage security operations, she explained to the corporate executives. I want to provide security. There's a difference. Managers analyze reports and develop policies. Security officers protect people. I want to protect people. Her decision puzzled executives who couldn't understand why someone would choose a lower-paying, lower-status position when offered advancement and recognition. But Sarah had learned something important about herself during her transition from federal agent to mall security. Job satisfaction didn't come from title or salary, but from the alignment between her skills and her values. The most meaningful recognition Sarah received came from the people she'd been protecting without their knowledge. Families who shopped at Aventura Mall began approaching her during her rounds, thanking her for keeping them safe and expressing gratitude for her dedication to their security. Mrs. Anita Rodriguez, a regular customer who brought her 3 children to the mall every Saturday, spoke for many when she told Sarah, "I always felt safe here, but I never knew why. Now I understand. Thank you for watching over." That sentiment, the idea that her presence had made ordinary people feel safe during ordinary moments, validated everything Sarah had hoped to accomplish in her career change. A year after the Black Friday arrests, Sarah Thompson was still working mall security at Aventura Mall. She'd been promoted to senior security officer, with responsibilities that included training new guards and developing security protocols, but she still walked her sectors and interacted with customers every day. The mall had changed in subtle ways since the organized crime case. Security procedures were more sophisticated, staff training was more comprehensive, and there was a general awareness that retail security required serious professional attention. But the fundamental character of the place remained the same: a community gathering space where families could shop, eat, and spend time together in safety. Sarah had also changed. The intensity that her colleagues had once found off-putting was now understood as professionalism and dedication. The knowledge and experience that had seemed excessive for mall security were now recognized as valuable assets that made everyone safer. Most importantly, Sarah had found the peace that had eluded her during her federal law enforcement career. She was using her skills to protect people, but she was doing it in an environment that emphasized prevention rather than punishment, community service rather than criminal prosecution. The Aventura Mall case became a subject of study at the FBI Academy and in criminal justice programs across the country. It demonstrated how traditional law enforcement skills could be adapted to community security roles, how professional criminals could be defeated by superior intelligence and preparation, and how the most effective security often came from the least obvious sources. But for Sarah, the case's significance was more personal. It had shown her that meaningful work wasn't defined by title, salary, or public recognition, but by the alignment between her abilities and her values. She had found a way to use 20 years of federal training to protect ordinary people during ordinary moments, and that felt like exactly the right use of her talents. During one of her rare interviews, with a criminal justice magazine that was analyzing the case for academic purposes, Sarah articulated the philosophy that had guided her career transition. People think security is about responding to threats after they appear, but real security is about creating an environment where threats don't develop in the first place. It's about being present, aware, and prepared so that ordinary people can live their lives without fear. She paused before continuing. "I spent 20 years catching criminals after they committed crimes. Now I spend my time preventing crimes before they happen. Both are important, but prevention feels more meaningful to me." The interviewer asked if she missed the excitement and prestige of federal law enforcement. "I miss working with talented colleagues and I miss the resources that come with federal authority," Sarah replied. "But I don't miss the stress, the travel, or the constant exposure to humanity's worst impulses. What I do now lets me see humanity's best impulses every day." As she finished her shift that evening, walking the same corridor she'd patrolled for over a year, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her from FBI agent to mall security guard. It wasn't the career trajectory anyone would have predicted, but it was the one that had given her the most satisfaction. The family shopping around her had no idea that the quiet woman in the security uniform had once hunted some of the country's most dangerous criminals. They just knew that she made them feel safe, and that was exactly how Sarah wanted it. 2 years after the Black Friday case, Sarah Thompson remained at her post at Aventura Mall, still walking her sectors with the same professional attention that had enabled her to detect and defeat a multi-million-dollar criminal operation. The mall had become her community, The shoppers had become her extended family, and the work had become